Thank you for being here today. In every relationship, personal or professional, there are certain standards of respect and decency that must be upheld. Unfortunately, we sometimes find ourselves tolerating behaviors that we know deep down are harmful, not just to ourselves, but to the culture around us. Let's be clear, being kind does not mean being a doormat. Being respectful does not mean staying silent. We all deserve to live, work, and grow in environments that are safe, empowering, and fair. Today, I want to talk about 7 behaviors that should never be tolerated, no matter who they come from, no matter what excuse is given. Recognizing these behaviors is the first step in holding people accountable and protecting our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. So let's dive into them, because calling them out is the first step toward cutting them out. 1. Disrespect. Disrespect is one of the most insidious behaviors we can encounter, and yet it's also one of the most commonly overlooked. It doesn't always scream, it often whispers. It shows up in eye rolls during conversation, in a mocking tone, in cutting comments that are passed off as just joking. It's in the way someone interrupts you mid-sentence, talks over your ideas, or dismisses your feelings without a second thought. Let's be clear, disrespect is not just about offensive words, it's about dismissive actions. It's when someone treats your time, thoughts, or presence as if they hold no value. It's when someone repeatedly ignores your input in a meeting, or when a friend constantly makes you the punchline of their jokes, even when you've said it bothers you, and over time, disrespect chips away at your self-worth. It creates an environment where people feel small, silenced, and second-guessed. It tells you subtly and consistently that you don't matter as much as others, and the worst part, when it's repeated often enough, you might even start to believe it. Disrespect can also be cultural or systemic, like when certain groups are ignored, stereotyped, or excluded because of their identity. When left unchecked, it breeds toxic workplaces, broken relationships, and divided communities. It's important to remember that respect is not something that's earned only by power or position. It's a basic human right. Every person, regardless of their role or status, deserves to be treated with dignity. You don't have to agree with someone to show them respect, but when respect is absent, any attempt at collaboration, communication, or connection will eventually fall apart. The danger lies in normalizing disrespect by brushing it off as not a big deal. But when we tolerate small acts of disrespect, we create space for larger forms of harm to take root. It is a slippery slope, from passive-aggressive comments to outright hostility. That's why disrespect, no matter how subtle, should never be tolerated. Whether it's in the workplace, at home, online, or in public, recognizing and rejecting disrespect is crucial. Setting boundaries, speaking up, and standing firm is not being sensitive, it's being self-respecting. And the more we practice calling it out, the more we contribute to environments where every voice is valued and every person feels seen. 2. Dishonesty. Dishonesty is more than just telling lies. It's a slow erosion of trust, clarity, and safety in any relationship or environment. Whether it's a small white lie, a half-truth, or a complete fabrication, dishonesty signals a fundamental breakdown in integrity. And when integrity goes, so does the foundation of any meaningful connection. At its core, dishonesty is a betrayal. When someone lies, whether by omission or commission, they are essentially making a decision on your behalf without your knowledge. They are withholding the truth because they believe that your reaction, your opinion, or your boundaries don't matter as much as their convenience, comfort, or control. That is not just unfair, it's deeply disrespectful. In personal relationships, dishonesty manifests in countless ways. It might be a partner hiding financial decisions, a friend saying one thing to your face and another behind your back, or a family member constantly twisting the truth to avoid taking responsibility. Over time, these lies build up. They create confusion, suspicion, and emotional distance. You begin to second-guess what's real, what's sincere, and even your own judgment. In professional settings, dishonesty can be even more damaging. A dishonest manager may take credit for others' work, hide important information, or manipulate facts to suit their agenda. A coworker may spread misinformation, conceal errors, or engage in deceitful tactics to climb the ladder. These actions don't just harm individuals. They corrode workplace culture and morale. Productivity drops. Trust evaporates. People disengage, not just emotionally but mentally, because they no longer feel safe or valued in an environment where the truth is optional. Dishonesty also has a ripple effect. Once someone gets away with a lie, it often emboldens them to continue, and others around them may start to question whether honesty is worth it, especially if they see deception being rewarded. Before long, a culture of dishonesty can take hold, where everyone is playing a role, hiding their truth, and protecting themselves from a system that no longer feels fair or authentic. But perhaps one of the most painful effects of dishonesty is the internal damage it causes. The person being lied to often carries the burden of confusion, hurt, and self-doubt. They may question their instincts, feel foolish for trusting, or even blame themselves for not noticing the truth sooner. That internal unrest can linger far longer than the lie itself. Let's also remember that dishonesty doesn't always come in the form of grand betrayals. Sometimes it's the consistent little lies, those harmless misstatements, excuses, or conveniently forgotten details that wear people down the most. They create a constant, low-level tension that makes real connection impossible. Truth may be uncomfortable at times, but it is also freeing. It creates space for genuine understanding, growth, and resolution. Without honesty, there can be no accountability. Without accountability, there can be no healing or progress. So when dishonesty enters any relationship, it doesn't just hide the truth. It hides the possibility of something better. 3. Manipulation. Manipulation is one of the most dangerous and deceptive behaviors a person can experience. Unlike obvious acts of disrespect or open dishonesty, manipulation often hides in plain sight. It's subtle, calculated, and frequently disguised as care, concern, or reason. But make no mistake, manipulation is about control. It's about influencing someone's thoughts, emotions, or actions for personal gain, often at the expense of their well-being or autonomy. What makes manipulation particularly harmful is that it doesn't always look malicious on the surface. Sometimes it comes dressed in charm, cloaked in kindness, or packaged as persuasion. The manipulator might act like they're helping you, supporting you, or doing what's best for you, while subtly steering decisions to serve their own interests. Over time, this behavior erodes your confidence and clouds your ability to trust your own judgment. One common form of manipulation is gaslighting, where someone distorts facts, denies reality, or twists events to make you doubt your memory, perception, or sanity. You might hear things like, "You're overreacting," "That never happened," or "You're too sensitive." These phrases may seem harmless at first, but repeated often enough, they lead you to question your own mind and rely more heavily on the manipulator's version of the truth. Another form is guilt tripping, when someone uses your empathy or sense of responsibility against you. They might say, "After all I've done for you," or "I guess I just don't matter to you anymore," in order to make you feel obligated to give in to their demands. It's a coercive tactic that shifts the focus from their inappropriate behavior to your reaction, making you feel selfish or unkind for setting healthy boundaries. There's also emotional blackmail, where threats, either overt or implied, are used to control your decisions. It can be as obvious as "If you leave me, I'll hurt myself," or as subtle as "Don't expect me to be here for you next time." The manipulator uses fear, guilt, or obligation as tools to trap you into compliance, keeping you in situations that may be unhealthy, one-sided, or toxic. Manipulation can happen in all kinds of relationships: romantic, familial, social, or professional. A boss might manipulate an employee by dangling the possibility of a promotion without ever intending to deliver it, just to extract more work. A parent might emotionally manipulate their child by withdrawing love or affection when the child acts independently. Friends might manipulate each other by controlling social dynamics, spreading rumors, or creating power imbalances. The effects of long-term manipulation are serious. Victims often feel confused, anxious, emotionally drained, and powerless. Because manipulation is so covert, people often struggle to identify what's happening until they're deeply entangled in it. They may feel stuck, unsure of how to assert themselves without causing conflict, and afraid of the emotional consequences if they speak up or walk away. Perhaps the most insidious thing about manipulation is that it undermines your ability to trust, not just in others, but in yourself. It sows seeds of self-doubt, making you question your instincts and emotions, and when you no longer trust yourself, it becomes much harder to break free. Recognizing manipulation takes courage and clarity. It means paying attention not just to what someone says, but how it makes you feel. Do you constantly feel guilty, confused, or like you're walking on eggshells around a person? Do your boundaries seem to vanish when they're around? Do they make you feel responsible for their emotions or decisions? These are all signs that manipulation may be at play. 4. Abuse of power. Abuse of power is one of the most damaging behaviors that can occur in any environment, from the workplace to the home, from schools to governments. It happens when someone in a position of authority misuses their role to control, exploit, or intimidate others for their own benefit. This misuse can be overt and aggressive, or subtle and insidious, but the result is always the same: the suppression of others' rights, voices, and dignity. Power in itself is not a bad thing. When used ethically, power can protect, uplift, and inspire. Leaders, parents, teachers, managers, all of these roles carry influence and the ability to make impactful decisions. But when someone uses that influence to dominate rather than guide, to silence rather than support, they cross a line. The balance of power shifts from responsibility to coercion. Abuse of power can manifest in countless ways. In the workplace, it might look like a manager threatening to withhold promotions or job security unless an employee complies with unreasonable demands, or worse, engages in unethical or inappropriate behavior. It may involve favoritism, discrimination, or using position to belittle or micromanage employees, creating a climate of fear and anxiety. In schools, it can look like a teacher humiliating a student in front of peers, exploiting authority instead of fostering a safe space for learning. In homes, it might take the form of a parent using their role to emotionally manipulate or control a child, rather than nurture and guide them. In broader systems, abuse of power shows up in forms like police brutality, corruption in political leadership, or corporate exploitation of vulnerable populations. These are not just personal failings, they are structural problems that perpetuate inequality, fear, and injustice. What makes abuse of power particularly dangerous is the built-in resistance to accountability. Those in power often surround themselves with systems, people, or policies that protect them from consequences. Victims may feel helpless or afraid to speak out, fearing retaliation, social exclusion, or further harm. The imbalance can be so extreme that those who are harmed feel they have no voice, no choice, and no safe path forward. Moreover, abusers of power often rely on gaslighting or misinformation to keep control. They might deny wrongdoing, shift blame onto others, or use their authority to rewrite the narrative. This creates confusion and self-doubt among those being mistreated, making it even harder for them to trust their own experiences or seek justice. Abuse of power doesn't always need to be loud or violent to be harmful. It can take the form of constant undermining, subtle threats, or the withholding of opportunities and resources. Over time, this kind of mistreatment chips away at a person's confidence, autonomy, and sense of worth. It can lead to long-term emotional trauma, stress, and a deep-seated mistrust of leadership or authority figures. And let's not forget, abuse of power can happen in relationships too. When one partner uses emotional, financial, or physical control to dominate the other, that too is an abuse of the power dynamic. Whether through manipulation, fear, or intimidation, the aim is always the same: to make the other person feel small, dependent, or trapped. What's especially alarming is how normalized abuse of power can become if it isn't confronted. In workplaces, people may say, "That's just how it is around here." In families, it might be dismissed as tough love. In institutions, it may be buried under layers of bureaucracy or denial. This normalization only deepens the harm, reinforcing cycles of silence and submission. 5. Bullying or harassment. Bullying and harassment are among the most blatant and aggressive forms of unacceptable behavior, and yet they are far too common in all areas of life: schools, workplaces, families, online spaces, and public environments. These behaviors are rooted in the desire to exert control, instill fear, or inflict harm, emotionally, psychologically, or even physically. What makes them especially damaging is that they are often repeated, systematic, and targeted, leaving victims feeling powerless, isolated, and emotionally exhausted. Bullying can take many forms: name calling, mockery, public humiliation, threats, spreading rumors, or physical intimidation. It is not confined to childhood playgrounds. It evolves into adulthood, showing up in the workplace as verbal abuse, exclusion, or sabotaging someone's performance or reputation. It can appear in homes, between siblings, or even from a parent, where one person constantly undermines, criticizes, or emotionally torments another. It can even occur in friendships, where one individual dominates the dynamic through belittlement or manipulation disguised as humor. Harassment, similarly, is a sustained pattern of unwelcome behavior that creates a hostile, intimidating, or offensive environment. It often involves elements of identity, targeting someone based on their gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, or other personal attributes. Sexual harassment, for example, is one of the most widely recognized and underreported forms where individuals, often women, are subjected to inappropriate comments, advances, or coercive behavior that leaves them feeling unsafe and violated. Racial and cultural harassment are also deeply harmful, involving discriminatory jokes, slurs, or microaggressions that dehumanize and degrade. What makes bullying and harassment particularly dangerous is their psychological impact. Victims may begin to question their worth, withdraw from social or professional environments, and suffer from anxiety, depression, or chronic stress. The effects can be long-lasting, affecting not only mental health but also physical health, sleep, self-esteem, and motivation. In extreme cases, persistent bullying and harassment have driven individuals to self-harm or suicide. This is not just teasing or toughening someone up. This is abuse. Technology has also added a new dimension to bullying and harassment: cyberbullying. The anonymity and reach of digital platforms allow aggressors to harass victims 24/7, often without immediate consequences. Through social media, texting, emails, or public forums, people can be harassed relentlessly with harmful messages, doxing, threats, or the spreading of false or humiliating information. The emotional toll of digital harassment is just as real, and often more overwhelming, because the attack can follow someone everywhere, even into the perceived safety of their own home. One of the most frustrating challenges victims face is the minimization or denial of their experience. Phrases like "just ignore it," "they're just joking," or "don't be so sensitive" can invalidate the pain. 6. Lack of accountability. Lack of accountability is a deeply corrosive behavior that undermines trust, disrupts progress, and damages relationships. It occurs when individuals consistently refuse to take responsibility for their actions, choices, or the consequences that follow. Instead of owning up to mistakes, they deflect, blame others, make excuses, or deny any wrongdoing altogether. Over time, this pattern can fracture teams, destabilize families, and ruin friendships, not because mistakes are being made, but because those mistakes are never acknowledged or addressed. Being human means being imperfect. Everyone will make poor decisions at some point, but what defines a person's character isn't perfection. It's the willingness to admit fault, make amends, and grow. Lack of accountability, on the other hand, reveals a mindset that is more concerned with ego preservation than truth, growth, or integrity. In personal relationships, the effects of this behavior can be especially painful. If one partner refuses to take responsibility for hurtful words, emotional neglect, or broken promises, the other partner ends up carrying the emotional weight of the relationship alone. Apologies are either absent or insincere, and meaningful change never happens because the responsible party won't even acknowledge the problem. Over time, this creates a toxic imbalance where one person is always cleaning up the emotional mess left behind by the other. In families, lack of accountability can become generational. Parents who never take responsibility for their actions, who deny or minimize the harm they've caused, often raise children who either replicate the same behavior or spend their lives trying to heal from it. When parents refuse to apologize or model accountability, they send a message that power absolves responsibility. This can create deep emotional wounds and lead to long-term resentment, anxiety, or strained family ties. In the workplace, lack of accountability is one of the fastest ways to kill morale and teamwork. When a colleague consistently misses deadlines, shifts blame, or refuses to admit mistakes, others are forced to cover for them or deal with the fallout. This creates tension, burnout, and frustration. Worse still, if managers or leaders lack accountability, it sets a tone for the entire organization, where finger-pointing replaces problem-solving, and protecting reputations becomes more important than fixing issues. In this kind of culture, employees become disengaged, innovation slows, and high-performing individuals often leave. On a societal level, lack of accountability becomes dangerous when institutions, governments, or public figures are allowed to operate without transparency or consequences. When wrongdoing is overlooked, excused, or covered up, whether it's corruption, abuse, negligence, or systemic injustice, it erodes public trust and reinforces a culture of impunity. The message becomes clear: those in power are above the rules, and those harmed by them are on their own. Another harmful aspect of this behavior is blame shifting, where people avoid responsibility by redirecting fault onto someone else. This might sound like, "It's not my fault you feel that way," or "You made me do it." These statements are more than just dismissive, they are manipulative. They invalidate the experiences of others and create confusion about who is actually responsible. In time, those on the receiving end may start to question themselves or feel unjustly guilty for situations they didn't cause. Lack of accountability is not just about denying blame, it's about refusing to learn, evolve, or engage in honest reflection. It closes the door to self-awareness and change. People who avoid accountability tend to repeat the same mistakes over and over because they've never stopped to understand the impact of their actions. And often, they believe they can do so without consequence because others have allowed them to get away with it in the past. But accountability isn't just about admitting wrong. It's also about making things right. It requires humility, emotional maturity, and the courage to face discomfort. People who take responsibility don't just say, "I'm sorry." They ask, "What can I do to fix this?" They recognize that relationships, teams, and communities thrive not when people are perfect, but when people are willing to show up with honesty and a willingness to grow. 7. Contempt for boundaries. Contempt for boundaries is one of the most harmful and often overlooked behaviors that should never be tolerated. Boundaries are essential to healthy relationships, personal well-being, and mutual respect. They define where one person ends and another begins, emotionally, physically, mentally, and even spiritually. When someone shows disregard or even open hostility toward another person's boundaries, they are effectively saying, "Your comfort, needs, and limits don't matter to me." That kind of behavior is not only disrespectful, it's destructive. Boundaries exist in many forms. There are emotional boundaries, which protect your feelings and mental health. There are physical boundaries, which relate to your personal space and bodily autonomy. Time boundaries protect how you spend your energy. Communication boundaries regulate how you're spoken to. And relational boundaries define the roles and expectations within relationships. Contempt for any of these areas is a serious red flag because it reveals a deep lack of empathy and consideration. In close relationships, boundary violations can be subtle at first. pushing you to share more than you're comfortable with, pressuring you to say yes when you clearly mean no, or dismissing your need for space or privacy. Over time, these small violations accumulate and often escalate. A partner may become possessive or controlling, guilt, tripping you when you seek independence. A friend might constantly interrupt your personal time, make demands on your availability, or dismiss your efforts to communicate your limits. A family member might repeatedly bring up painful topics after you've asked them not to, or insert themselves into areas of your life that are none of their business. In professional environments, contempt for boundaries can manifest as overreach by managers or coworkers, expecting responses at all hours, disregarding personal time, or making inappropriate comments. It can involve supervisors who don't respect your workload limits, coworkers who constantly invade your personal space, or colleagues who ignore direct requests to stop certain behavior. When left unaddressed, these boundary violations can lead to burnout, stress, and a toxic workplace culture where individuals feel devalued and powerless. Online, boundary violations are widespread and often intensified by the false sense of anonymity or entitlement that digital platforms provide. People may harass others through repeated messaging, share private information without consent, or pressure individuals into sharing content or engaging in interactions that make them uncomfortable. This creates an environment where users, especially young people, feel constantly vulnerable and exposed. What makes contempt for boundaries especially dangerous is how it often comes masked in manipulation, guilt, or entitlement. A person may say, "I'm just trying to be close to you," or "Why are you being so distant?" when in reality, they are testing your limits and trying to make you feel guilty for asserting your needs. Others may become angry or passive, aggressive when you enforce a boundary, attempting to make you feel like the problem for simply protecting your own well-being. Repeatedly ignoring someone's boundaries is not a misunderstanding, it's a choice. And it's often a choice rooted in control. When someone continues to do something you've clearly said no to, they are choosing their comfort over your consent. They are prioritizing their wants over your needs. This kind of behavior fosters resentment, emotional fatigue, and a breakdown of trust. What's more, people who show contempt for boundaries often rely on others not speaking up. They count on silence, on your desire to keep the peace, and on your fear of conflict. This is why assertiveness and clear communication are so critical. Boundaries are not meant to be walls, they are guidelines for how we expect to be treated, and when those guidelines are ignored, challenged, or mocked, it is not just inconsiderate, it is a violation of your personhood. Furthermore, it's important to recognize that boundaries are not up for debate. You don't need to explain or justify your need for space, privacy, rest, or respect. People who genuinely care for you will respect your limits, even if they don't fully understand them. Those who treat your boundaries as negotiable or irrelevant are showing you that they value control or access over connection.